Hello, my name is Julie Schmieder, and today I'll be sharing my research proposal presentation with you. What is it that I hope to learn from this research project? Well, my question or wondering is how is student performance and motivation affected by direct instruction compared to that of student-led activities? Educators are constantly reflecting on their practices and working to determine what is best for their students. In recent years, direct or teacher-led instruction has been viewed as an outdated approach. But why? Is this how students learn best? How does it affect their motivation and performance? Is student-led instruction the way of the future? Is this the best approach for this generation of students? Will this teaching method improve student performance and motivation? These are the questions that I hope to be able to answer through conducting my study. I want to be able to determine what the best teaching practices are to be able to help my students to not only be successful, but to find the material to be relevant and to feel motivated. Does lecture or teacher-led direct instruction have a place in the classroom today? Through my research and resources that I found, there are studies that say yes, including Schmieder and Wupperman. They explore this highly criticized approach to examine the drawbacks and the benefits. In their study, they find that students score higher on standardized tests in the subject in which their teachers spent more time on lecture-style presentations than in the subject in which the teacher devoted more time to problem-solving activities. I hope to determine if through my study I find the same thing or if I find something different. Do certain types of students benefit more from lecture than others? Well, Schmieder and Wupperman confirm that the relationship between lecture-style teaching and achievement is strongest among higher achieving and more advantaged students. Again, I hope to see if I see any correlation in this in my study. It is clear that direct instruction has benefits in the classroom, but it may not be the best approach to use with all of our learners every day. I hope to determine if I can answer that question. Support for direct instruction. Shepard-Barabash writes a convincing argument in support of direct instruction through a close examination of Siegfried Engelmann's studies on the topic. Siegfried believes that direct instruction can be successful for all types and levels of learners, despite opposition from many experts in the field of education. Engelmann believes that direct instruction is designed to teach more in less time and therefore benefit all students, but especially low performers. He refers to direct instruction as being the ugly duckling of education, but does not quite understand why it's viewed so negatively since there are repeated demonstrations that it does work. Part of this ongoing study will examine the outcomes of direct instruction learning versus that of student-led learning. Support for student-led instruction. I did some research and found some information on flipped classrooms, and as Medley puts it, a flipped classroom involves putting aside the old stereotypical history teacher and replacing them with a teacher that never lectures but instead provides students time to work hands-on with the content and apply their learning from bell to bell, so a much different approach. A flipped classroom, therefore, converts the lesson into the form of a video that's watched before the classroom learning takes place. It then provides class time for students to complete work, which then allows for individualized pacing, gives time to ask questions, and presents opportunities to complete differentiated and student-led activities. This allows the teacher to become more of a facilitator and allows them to be able to work with students that need intervention or perhaps provide students with a challenge instead of using class time to lecture with students. They come with that information front-loaded. Does this method better prepare students by allowing them to work at their own individual level and pace and allow them to receive differentiated guidance? I hope to find out. McCarthy's support for student-centered classrooms puts the teacher as the decision maker and in the role of a facilitator. This is where students then take control of their own learning and make great strides that result in showing growth. He also states, and student-centered classrooms include students in the planning, implementation, and assessments. Students provided with opportunity to share in classroom decision-making therefore gain confidence in leading and allow teacher-led instruction to shift towards student-led, and therefore students become empowered to take more control of their own education. I hope to see if I have the same results in my study. Support for hands-on learning and student-led learning. Katie Ash believes in the power of hands-on learning. She conducted an experiment in her classroom where one group of students was taught about water quality through lecture and textbook readings, and the other group built a hands-on water purification system. The results of the study show an outcome in support of hands-on learning. The researchers found that students who built the hands-on water purification system had a deeper understanding of the concepts than the students who had lecture-based lessons, especially in students whom English was not their first language. I have some ELL students in my classroom, so I hope to be able to take a close examination of how this affects my students. In this study, though, they did not include details on how the students were chosen to participate in each of the different groups, but it does show some promise in support of using student-led exploration and tactile strategies to give students the opportunity to think deeply and to problem solve along the way. I found some criticism in the methods used by social studies teachers. So Bain confirms that for at least a century, educational critics and school reformers have pointed to high school history teaching as the model for poor and ineffective pedagogy. History teachers have been viewed as unprepared educators that use ineffective methods, such as using questions that come directly from the textbook, which in turn creates a dry and lackluster experience for students. There's been a huge push for educators in the content area of social studies to move beyond the textbook, recitation, and standard lecturing of the old school classroom to instead create a more hands-on and active way of learning. Does the classroom environment make a difference in which approach is better suited? Determining how to best teach students, of course, depends on the students that you have in your classroom and their own unique needs. Bransford, Brown, and Cocking believe that educators must respect the knowledge, background, and culture that students bring into the classroom. They view learner-centered environments as those where teachers are constructing a bridge between the subject matter and the student. And they also believe that a learner-centered environment alone will not allow students to acquire the skills necessary in order to function effectively in society. They theorize that teachers must consider the knowledge and preconceptions about the subject matter that the students bring to the classroom in order to understand how they will approach the learning material. I've done a lot in my classroom to get to know my students, so I am wondering how this is going to play out in my classroom, based on its own unique classroom environment compared to the classroom of others. How do we motivate our students to learn? This is something that I want to closely examine. There's no magic elixir for students' lack of motivation, engagement, and achievement in social studies, but literacy strategies were seen as a help that teachers might use to pique students' interest and to help them succeed. Through the use of literacy strategies, teachers can differentiate instruction, help students to develop the ability to think deeply about concepts and content material, and apply the information that they have learned in a multitude of settings in the real world. Creating relevance through literacy can help students to find success in the fields of social studies. That's what I have found in my research so far, and I am wondering if I'll find the same thing in my classroom for motivating my students. So in order to determine the best method of instruction, data is going to be collected through a variety of means to reflect upon and for me to be able to draw conclusions from. So what will this study look like? My study is going to be taking place in a 9th grade world history classroom at Brunswick High School. I'll actually be using 2 of my world history classes. One is an inclusion class and one is a general education class to help me collect data for this study. I'll be using approximately 55 students total, and approximately 9 of those students have an IEP. This study is going to be taking place between the months of January and this March. Quick overview of this study. I'll be taking 2 months worth of data I'll be collecting, and I will be using a variety of instructional methods to collect and examine and to reflect on whether teacher-directed instruction or student-led instruction, what the impact is on student performance and their motivation in the classroom. How will I be collecting this data? So in order to measure performance, I will be using summative and formative assessments. And to measure motivation and engagement, I'll be using surveys where I ask students their opinions and feelings and get some feedback on the lesson activity. And I'll also be using interviews where I'll be able to gain a deeper understanding from feedback on students and to get a clear understanding of their preference in lesson delivery. The summative informative assessments being used, as well as the surveys, are all part of the regular routine in my classroom to collect data to use for teacher decision making, designs of lessons, reflection, and discussions in our teacher-based TBT teams. No ethical risks or issues are expected. Data will be collected with names so that I will be able to decipher between regular and general education students and to provide for the needs of my students, but names of students will not be published and data will be kept confidential on my password-protected computer. A timeline of research. So January and February is when I'll be giving surveys after lessons to collect student feedback. I'll be offering formative assessments and summative assessments and collecting data on that, as well as conducting interviews. In March, I hope to be able to finish collecting data and to begin analysis, and then analyzing data and preparing to present my findings in April. Let the study begin. I look forward to learning more about how student-led and teacher-led instruction affect my students' performance and motivation, and I'm excited to report out on my findings. Should you have any additional questions about my study, I can be contacted by email at jschmieder@bcsoh.org. Thanks for watching my presentation.